high-budget cast, a fixed camera angle, a story shattered in time and simple actions. What happens when you mix all of these ingredients? You get Annapurna Interactive's latest publication, 12 Minutes, written by Luis Antonio, who's also the art director of The Witness. After 2 years of waiting since E3 2019, the interactive narrative is finally available for purchase, and, even better, on Game Pass. The story has a simple premise. A man comes home and greets his wife. After a few dialogues and choices, someone suddenly knocks on the door and forces themselves into the couple's home. After avoiding any kind of conversation, the intruder brutally kills the protagonist. But surprisingly, everything starts all over again. From this moment on, the same scene plays over and over again, although something new comes up every time. 12 Minutes manages to keep a cinematic rhythm, with a few hiccups given by the player trying to repeat the same pattern over and over again. In fact, one could say these hiccups improve the tempo even more, because they are a clear sign that you're doing something wrong and you should think outside the box. Since pieces of information need to be gathered in any way possible, the game forces you to play out brutal or friendly scenarios, and the switch between one and the other induces a sort of coldness into the player. Whenever you think something is too dumb to be possible, the writers surprise you with an action or a dialogue that is specific for that small decision. There's things you can click and combine, and while it is very simple from a gameplay point of view, the narrative outcomes are always original and add layers and layers to the same story. 12 Minutes is based on a loop, but it never feels boring. The constant tension given by the arrival of the intruder after a few minutes, the new dialogue options unlocked by interactions with objects and characters, the atmosphere thickened by sounds like the weather changing, the cars passing by, the neighbor's cat making noises without ever appearing. The story is convoluted and cryptic, but it unfolds more and more after each loop, until the very end. It truly feels real, even though everything is seen from a fixed angle. The characters become stories instead of faces. We've heard many things about breaking the fourth wall, but here it's more appropriate to talk about the fifth wall. We don't interact with the characters, they don't talk to us. We spy everything from above, just like the set of a play. Or even better, it reminds me of a puppet show, or a dollhouse, but one where you only get to move the protagonist. While we don't really get to see the faces of the characters, the voices are very recognizable. I'm not too impressed by the performances, but I do appreciate that the quality of the performance is defined by the standard parameters minus the facial expressions. Except for those terrible views through the peephole. What the is this? So, motion capture and the actors' voices become more important than ever. This makes 12 Minutes a really interesting experiment, especially for a trio of actors that are used to being on the big screen, but in a very different way. Side note, James McAvoy and Daisy Ridley apparently became 100% American, and I'm still impressed that they completely changed their natural accent.
Is this a present for me?
You weren't supposed to find that.
And Willem Dafoe is, well, Willem Dafoe.
Police, open up.
On top of that, music also plays a minor role. It never leads the scene, but it is constantly part of the ambience with its subtle volume. On a few occasions, it changes according to moments of confession, tension, and this moves the game another step closer to the rhythm of a movie, which is studied in order to always keep a high level of attention. The sounds mentioned before are also part of the so-called music of the game, and I really appreciate the different filters used to change the acoustic perception when listening through a closed door.
Me?
Yes, you. Hands behind your back. Let's go. Hold still.
Or the blinds of a closet.
just us then.
I said a lot of nice things about 12 minutes, but there are a few aspects that I didn't appreciate too much. The first one is that logic and physics are sometimes neglected to limit some choices. I have a few examples, but they would all require spoilers to be understood. So I'll just mention the most simple one. If you hide in the bathroom when the cop comes in, he instantly knows where you are, even though in other scenarios, he doesn't go to the same room immediately.
Hey, come on.
Will you help?
Easier if you just
This
come
is a
out.
misunderstanding.
Open the door.
Look,
now.
I don't know. Don't have to handcuff me. We can talk this out.
Enough.
You're making a mistake. This is...
This bothered me because in my head I already played out a sequence that completely made sense according to how many outcomes each loop can have. But maybe I was asking too much, and the fact that every detail is taken into consideration makes each dead end more difficult to digest. The second one is that a couple times it's very easy to get stuck because of a missed click on an object that you already interacted with. Once again, I can't provide the details, but I'm talking in general about objects that can be inspected up close. In my head, the inspection should automatically unlock all the dialogues associated with such an object. But in a few cases, another click is required to make the protagonist deduce something. This all sounds very confusing if you haven't played, but the general idea is that while I previously said that getting stuck in doing the same sequence relentlessly many times almost forces you to think outside the box and change something, at the same time it is still possible to get stuck because of a small distraction. Some might call it part of the game, but it did make things frustrating on a couple occasions. Last but not least, some animations tend to overlap. While it is nearly impossible to make every transition smooth, I think there's space for some improvement. In conclusion, 12 minutes is a great project, while also being very small. Who knows if it's possible to think about every detail while also making a larger game? Probably it wouldn't really make sense, because the story feels complete. The gameplay is always interesting and the tension is never lacking. It took me about 5.5 hours to get 2 main endings, because yes, there's more than one ending, which is always a great feature, especially because complex sequences build up to each one of them. So it lasted much longer than I thought. The 12 minutes in the title really feel like it, even though it's possible to skip dialogues, which is awesome whenever you repeat a pattern of actions just to change a small detail in the end. Overall, I'd recommend this title to anyone who's into puzzle storytelling and psychological thrillers. But enough of that. Did you play 12 minutes? If yes, how was your experience? And most importantly, how many endings did you manage to get? I'd love to start a conversation with anyone interested. Thanks for listening and see you next time.